watching NewsX. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. Our big focus this hour, major Byju's shareholders, including Prosus, Envy and Peak 15 partners, have voted to oust its founder as chief executive officer, escalating a battle over the fate of the once high-flying online tutoring startup that is fighting to remain a business. In a statement, the company has stated, and I quote, Byju swiftly rejects the resolution, which also sought to remove Byju Raveendran from the board of the company founded in 2015. Byju has argued that the resolution was passed during the recently concluded general meeting, which was attended by a small cohort of selected shareholders, hence making it invalid and ineffective. The decision made by the shareholders was the aftermath of a rowdy hours-long Zoom call for investors and management. Well, the turmoil started when the online education pioneer Byju's and its creditor missed an interested payment on a $1.2 billion loan, which has now completely spiraled. Remember, viewers, the Enforcement Directorate has urged the Bureau of Immigration to issue a fresh lookout circular against Byju's Raveendran to prevent him from leaving the country. Well, the question that arises is, what's next for Byju's in the edutech landscape in India? Well, joining us at this point live is Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist. We also have Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, President, Center for Digital Economy Policy Research, joining us live. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, also joins the broadcast. Let me make a start with you, Dr. Sharad Kohli. What do you believe has prompted this decision to be taken?
Well, I think this is a classic case of a startup fairy tale. It started in COVID, and probably I think Mr. Byju thought that this online tutoring is going to remain forever, and children are never going to go back to school and never going to go back to classes, or even if they go back to classes, probably they will get addicted to this online studying. Well, somewhere he went wrong. And, from $22 billion, I remember this was the most valued startup in India. It has come down to nothing now, literally. It's not even $1 billion. If you ask me in real terms, it is worth nothing right now. That's why the shareholders are grumbling. And that's the reason, Uday, that shareholders want.
All right, I think we've lost Dr. Kohli there, unfortunately. Let me bring in Gautam Mukherjee if I can. Gautam, if you can hear me, what is your interpretation of the series of events which has finally led to the ouster of the CEO?
Well, the kind of valuation that this company achieved in a very short time, it built a very high profile. And as Sharad was saying, it did well during the COVID and plummeted after that. It also used high-profile advertising. And what happens is most of these startups use up a lot of the venture capital very rapidly. And so when they hit the skids, there is nothing left. They're not able to pay, as has been seen, the interest on their borrowings. And now the shareholders are after, and whatever he may try and do, he will be, brought to ground for long. It is a familiar story. It has happened in a number of instances, and now it's happened to Byju. It looked pretty weird the way it was going in any case, and so it was a short flight and a crash landing.
Yes, Sharad, I think you're back with us. Sharad, please complete your point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize, first of all, for losing the connection for a while. So I think this is, as I said, this is a classic fairy tale story. And for the benefit of NewsX viewers, even though we are world's third largest startup ecosystem after America and China, well, not many people know that about 80 to 85% startups do not succeed. But then because the numbers are so many, that for whatever 15-20% who succeed, they end up making big. But I think the mistake with Byju's did was that he was over-ambitious. When I say over-ambitious, if you see the expense, I was looking at the cost sheet of Byju's. The money which, as Gautam rightly said, the money which came in from the investors was used, I'm sorry to say this, was used recklessly. The way he escalated his cost, the kind of overheads he took on his shoulders were unimaginable. They were not feasible. They were not sustainable. So the moment, the teaching institutions started opening up, Gradually, the revenue came down. He took some of the finest teachers. I still remember his taking over the Akash Institute, the famous training, the IIT or the JEE training module. He took over the whole thing in an all cash deal. Now, I'm sure the seller of Akash is laughing away to the bank. But what he took in his control, probably that is still giving him some profits because there is a physical aspect of classes involved. But I think the whole online proposition seems to have very, very subdued response now. I don't say that children have given away online teaching, but then online teaching as such for a very young lot of students doesn't seem to work because traditional school system is still prevalent, still healthy, still considered as intellectually stimulating. The online system is not for a normal times. I think that's what Byju Raveendran forgot. As far as the board meeting is concerned, the board meeting is decided on the basis of majority of the shareholders voting. It is not a question whether a resolution is rejected or accepted. It is what percentage of shareholders voted in the meeting. If they had the majority, unfortunately, Mr. Byju Raveendran will have to go. He cannot challenge this resolution because it has the vote of most of the shareholders. He can go to the court, he can contest it. But it's a very unique and classic case. We've heard this happening in America, Uday, that the founders of the company are themselves ousted out of the company after some time. This is a very unique case in India for a company of that size, which once had $22 billion of valuation, where the very person after whose name the company is running, the brand name. This was once having franchise of the Indian cricket team. I mean, the sponsorships, everything that he did was over the board. So the very name of the company now is out. So it is bye-bye to Byju's, as far as I feel, because the investors are not going to let him continue for whatever he's done to the company so far. Uday.
All right, let me in fact take that across to Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya as well. Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, obviously this was coming. Many believe that this was coming for a while. But now with this decision being taken, what do you read between the lines into the future of Byju's and now what happens next? Because obviously this is something that the company plans to contest.
Yeah, if you compare it with, let's say, WeWork, which also had a massive devaluation and it also kind of melted down.
Yes.
What it looks like is that the valuation of Byju's is less than 1/100th of what it was, not 1/10th, not 1/15, 1/100th, which then raises a question that was there ever any revenue source, any credible revenue source coming in, or was it just a string of buyouts and smokes and mirror? I mean, I don't have the answer. It's just a question that comes out because the valuation has crashed by 1/100th. If there was a credible business model ever, then the valuation couldn't have come down to 1/100th. Also, as Dr. Kohli mentioned, Byju's went on to have a string of acquisitions from Akash, Whitehead Jr., and so on and so forth, a whole bunch of them, both in India and in US and elsewhere. Now, what happened to those acquisitions? Those were money-generating initiatives. Akash is a massively money-generating initiative. So where are these revenues going? What happened to these businesses? Were these businesses destroyed? And was it really a case of malified intention or incompetence? Was it a push by the investors to really grow fast, and which is not possible? Or was it the smokes and mirrors done by the founders? So these are questions that need to be answered. Reading between the lines, it's very difficult to find out what really happened. And again, as Dr. Kohli mentioned, it happens everywhere else also. But the scale of Byju's was really very large. And if you remember, in the first .com boom, there was e-Gurukul, which also scaled up. But there was an issue where people were not willing to have education through the internet. And Byju seemed to have broken that spell by making people come onto the internet and start getting education. In the K to 12 segment, which is children who are going to school segment, I don't think it has been demonstrated that the children and the students can go online and have an education. Perhaps again, as Dr. Kohli mentioned, perhaps during the COVID time that was happening, but post COVID that's not true. So it's a business model that was based on a habit which has not changed. So Byju's kind of said that we are going to change the habit of students and they can come online and get educated. That proposition has not been proven, and therefore the whole proposition of Byju starts crumbling down. Everything else that they acquired, like Whitehead Jr., there were numerous accusations that those entities were actually using very forceful practices to kind of emotionally blackmail parents into putting their kids into programming and other kinds of education. Whitehead Jr. would say that we'll teach your children space AI. And this was about 3 years back. What does space AI mean for a sixth grader who just needs to do some very, very basic coding learning? And the content of that was also extremely questionable. Now, those kind of questionable businesses were acquired by Byju's, and we don't know what else was. What are the other acquisitions that Byju's did? Did they have any value? Did they bring any value? Did they provide any advantage to students who were the target market, or was it all smokes and steam? I think at the end of the day, when the valuation crashes by 99%, which almost means that there is no value left to the company, there seems to be big question marks on what was really built then, what really happened in the last few years. Was something really built, or it was just nothing? It was just numbers being projected. If there was something built, then I'm sure and I hope Byju's will again rise from the ashes. But if there was nothing, and the proposition that people, and especially K to 12 students, can come online and get educated, if that proposition is not valid, then it'll be difficult for Byju's to come back, and that's a loss for the entire startup community.
All right. Let me, in fact, take that across to Dr. Kohli on what happens next. Dr. Kohli, what do you believe are going to be the next steps now taken by the company?
Well, I'll take it forward from where Dr. Jayjeet left.
Yeah.
He very rightly said that it depends on how much of the company, how much steam is left in the company. Is there any? Obviously, there is some business model, some revenue goes up, but from what I know, I spoke to some parents who had subscribed to the Byju's online subscriptions or whatever they were selling. They said that the selling was very, very forceful, as was just said, extremely forceful. I mean, parents were literally forced. No, if you don't take this, your child is going to fail. This is going to add value to your child, and so and so. So, very forceful proposition as far as a selling proposition is concerned for the children. I think it's not sustainable in the long term. Then I'm also, Uday, a startup mentor. I mentor about 200 startups myself. I have a grudge here, and I was speaking at a seminar a couple of days ago. I have a grudge here, and the grudge is that most of these startups, what is business about? Business is about profits. In India, they say Lala type business. Lala type business means you are only and only looking at profits. But unfortunately, the startup model of business was get a valuation and exit. I'm sure my viewers and my co-panelists would agree. Get a valuation and just look for an opportunity to exit. They were least focused on profits. What they forgot was the basic business premise is on profits. That how soon can you get the business into profits? Unfortunately, Byju's was nowhere near profits. And we take the example of Paytm, we take so many other examples. What happened to Flipkart? I mean, Flipkart, the Bansal brothers, they made a very, very profitable exit, and the profit was as high as 1,20,000 crores. That was the kind of profit that they made. So, and Flipkart, by the way, till now, because it is related to an Indian startup, it may not be an out-and-out Indian startup because basically it was in Singapore. But Flipkart till date, Uday, it's been so many years now, is not in profit. So who laughed to the bank? It was the founders. This is what all start. Now, not everybody is as lucky as Bansal brothers. You cannot exit at that kind of price, and the business carries on with the family in US, still at a loss, running the show because they wanted it. They wanted to compete with Amazon. So they had to acquire some big online platform. So they did it. But then the fact of the matter is that without looking at the bottom lines, which in simple language, we call it as profits, these startups are not going to sustain. So my message today through your show, Uday, whosoever is young and whosoever is running a startup, and all the viewers who are planning to do a startup or who are connected to the startup, my message is that for God's sake, please look at your bottom lines, get your startup into profits. If you're simply looking at valuations, you can be as lucky as a Flipkart, but you could be as unlucky and as sad story like Byju's for that matter, Uday.
All right. Let me, take that back across to Gautam Mukherjee. Gautam, do you believe this is the collapse of a business model, or is it internal decisions that have been taken wrongly in this particular case alone, and this sector or the model cannot be blamed?
Well, I think, as the other panelists have said, that they tried to hard sell it and so in a very short time, but with a very steep curve. And it simply collapsed. If they were more modest about it, what would have happened is that their valuation would not have been hyped up to 22 billion. The initial money would not have come in. The tranches that came in subsequently also would have not come in. So it's a toss-up when you are running one of these things between the hype and the reality. And the reality is almost never able to catch up to the hype. Flipkart was mentioned, but Flipkart with Walmart ownership has deep pockets and it can wait. Amazon had to wait. You have other sort of physical businesses like McDonald's that took years and years to achieve some measure of profitability, and that too viewed as an operating profit rather than an absolute profit, considering the amount that they have lost over the years. So you need deep pockets and commitment. Now, it is very suspect that many of these things just do not have either the commitment or the deep pockets. They're working with other people's money. And the sad thing about Byju's is they couldn't sell out and run. Instead, they've been caught with their pants down, and now the investors are carrying the can. If they can recover any money from Raveendran, that'll be something. Uday.
Yes. Dr. Jayjeet, at the end of the day, of course, do you believe this is a precedent for other companies as well? The way this entire episode has panned out, with the reluctance on the top level, finally investors taking things into their own hands, CEO being fired, is this a precedent for others too?
I hope not. How did it become this big becomes a question mark. $5 billion was duly being pumped into Byju's over a period of time, over 28 rounds of investment. It puts a question mark on the investment process itself, on the process of due diligence. Entities with such deep experience and expertise in finding out whether a company is profitable, in whether the business model is sustainable, whether the ethics are in place. They checked 28 times, and 28 times they put in the money, and then they're firing the CEO. There is something amiss in the entire ecosystem. I hope, therefore, that this does not get replicated. My other concern also is that we're talking about investors, we're talking about the founders. We're not talking about those who've already paid $1.5 lakh per course. Will the children continue to get that course, or will it stop? And who comes to their help? And will there be any continuity? What happens to the teachers who are in the roles? Will they be teaching the students? At the end of the day, it's the students and the teachers who will be at the receiving end, besides the investors. And obviously the investors are losing money, but then they did the due diligence. So, a lot of questions are coming up, and I think it's important for the government to step in at a certain level, especially in a sector like education. Education, healthcare, and agriculture are the cornerstones of our economy and society. So in these sectors, if we are having such entities which are coming in and promising that your child will become an Einstein, will teach you space AI programming, and so on and so forth, there needs to be some kind of a check and balance. I know the mood is to have very light regulations, and it should continue to be so. But within that light regulations framework, we need to have some regulatory constraints so that the hard-earned money of parents who are investing into their children's future, which is also the future of the country, does not go wasted in such initiatives which do not really contribute to education, as has come out. Because if it did contribute to education, then there would not be 99% loss of the total valuation of the company. Then there would have been a future of the company. So I think there are many learnings that are coming out, and I hope this does not get repeated.
Is the way this firing happened a precedent or not quite, Sharat Kohli?
Well, it should be. It should be because I think this is a lesson for the other startups to learn that if you go over the board, if you stretch your legs beyond your sheet, if your blanket is smaller, you're stretching beyond. More importantly, and this is another thing I spoke at the seminar I just referred to because it's all very fresh in the mind, so I don't mind recollecting and spelling it out here. That some of the startups, you'll be surprised, they treat the investment as their income. And I can give you, I mean, if we don't have that much of time on the show, I would have narrated you a story how a startup treated, he set up an office in Gurugram. He treated his entire $1 million of investment as his income and went for a swanky car, a swanky office, this and that. And finally, he was left with nothing after that. I mean, the main business didn't have any money. So I think the lesson for startups is definitely there in it, as rightly said by Dr. Jaydeep, that they should take a cue from this. But I think there is more to read here in Byju's, Uday, which is that it is not just the investors and Mr. Raveendran Byju who's right now suffering. I was talking to a HR person, a recruiter, who said that he's got at least 500 applications from Byju employees who want to quit Byju's right now. They're looking for jobs elsewhere. So see, who all are suffering? The employees are suffering. The investors are suffering. I'm sure Mr. Byju Raveendran is going through a lot of mental torture right now. Everybody connected, all the vendors of Byju's, then the students who had signed up those large packages. I don't know if they have enough teachers right now to teach. So this is, yes, actually, to answer your question very precisely, yes, this is a precedent. And I think we should take lessons. All startups must take lessons that do not stretch beyond your capacity. Have a foresighted vision. Get into a business model which is futuristic. You are ignoring the challenges. If Mr. Byju started something which was during COVID, very relevant during COVID, he probably forgot to imagine that COVID is not going to be forever. What happens when COVID is gone? Will the students still be addicted or still be adhering to the online platform? The answer was no. So I think there is a lack of vision here. So the lesson for startups is have a futuristic vision, which list out your challenges, meet the challenges, calculate your challenges, be prepared for those challenges, and then move ahead. And I'm surprised as to how did the investors get carried away, because some of the investors, after 28 rounds of investment which went into Byju's, some of the investors are very seasoned, Uday. They are investors who've invested in some of the finest startups around the world. How did the investors go wrong? If Mr. Raveendran went wrong, then the investors could have had a vision that where is this business model going to go? So either the business model has gone wrong, which definitely is the case, but more importantly, I think money has been spilled over overheads which were unnecessary. You know, we all know how much does it cost to sponsor an Indian cricket team, that too for more than 1 year. I think we need not reveal the numbers here. I don't want to urge BCCI that how expensive it is to sponsor cricket teams altogether. So I think the money has gone down the drain. The money has been wasted. If this money was put into research, Uday, my final statement is, if this money was put into research, if this money would have been put into making the whole business model immune of these challenges, I thought we would have talking differently today, Uday.
All right. Let me quickly get some last words now from Gautam Mukherjee. The way forward, Gautam, in your opinion?
Well, it is the startup universe and the funding process. There is a game between these two, and that needs to be scrutinized and possibly supervised by regulatory agencies, because there does appear to be some kind of collusion. To me, this is Byju's, but I've heard this story for a long, long time, ever since the internet space and companies started going on online. This has been going on because it was the same kind of business way of funding, and the funding is blown up and to a certain extent embezzled, to put it bluntly, and nothing much is done about it because it's sort of a new unregulated space. It's happened in Bitcoin, as you know. Billions are involved, and the person goes and stacks it in some island revenue place, and he doesn't mind going to jail for a few years because the amount he has embezzled is quite good for his retirement thereafter. And these people are terribly young. Some of them are in their 20s. So this is not a surprise. It's not new. But I cannot believe, as Jaideep said, that there were 28 rounds and they were none the wiser. I think they were, and this needs some kind of objective scrutiny. Such organizations cannot be allowed to just hype it and you go by just what they say, because there's very little in all, by definition, these things take years to actually mature into a viable business. That is understood, but you don't keep pumping in money. Every time you pump in money, you must ask, why am I pumping in money? To what end? And that I don't think is happening in most of these startups. Uday.
All right, let's leave it at that. My thanks to you for joining us. My thanks to all of you for joining us on this discussion.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.